Afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Richard Gazal, Senior Advisor at In Defense of Christians. On behalf of IDC, I'd like to welcome you to today's panel discussion. We have a great program in store. Specifically, we'll be discussing Turkish aggression in Syria and Iraq. With us today, we have an outstanding panel of experts who will be sharing their insights. Joining us today, we have Kino Gabriel, official spokesperson for the Syrian Democratic Forces and former spokesperson for the Syriac Military Council. Aram Hamparian, Executive Director of the Armenian National Committee of America, ANCA, Commissioner Nadine Manza, Executive Director of Patriot Voices and Commissioner at the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, USCIRF, and Dr. Michael Rubin, Resident Scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. Welcome to you all. Today's discussion on Turkey's aggression in Syria and Iraq will last roughly 1 hour and a half. The first hour, our panelists will provide their opening remarks, and in the last half hour, we'll conduct a Q&A session. So I encourage our viewers at home to please send in your questions all throughout our program, and you can use the chat function in Facebook Live. We'd really love to hear from you. Before kicking off our discussion of Turkish aggression, we'd be remiss not to provide an update on Turkish and Azerbaijani aggression in Artsakh. So at this time, I'd like to invite our good friend Aram Hamparian to open with a special welcome on behalf of IDC and ANCA, as well as an update on Artsakh. Aram.
Thank you very much, Rich. I want to take a moment before I start my remarks to thank you and Tufik, Stephen, and Sarah, and the rest of your remarkable team. You guys do the Lord's work, and we're deeply, deeply grateful during some very dark times. For the Armenian people. IDC stood shoulder to shoulder with us, and that's something that we'll always remember and are deeply, deeply grateful for. We saw in Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, the very types of aggression that has become all too familiar in the region, in Syria, Iraq, everywhere in the, let's say, the old Ottoman neighborhood. We're seeing a pan-Turkish drive at the expense of everybody else, and this is nothing new. This is what happened to the Armenians in 1915 and the other Christians, the Syriacs, the Chaldeans, Arameans, and others in Anatolia, in the present-day territory of Turkey. They were viewed as an inconvenient minority that needed to be eliminated as the Ottoman Empire was collapsing, and they were destroyed almost entirely, with the remaining survivors, exiled and scattered across the earth. That was a crime of opportunity under the cover of the First World War. Very much the same way, Turkey and Azerbaijan took advantage of some timing. They looked at a global pandemic. They looked at the tail end of a U.S. administration, the inattention of the world due to other factors, and they decided this was the time to attack Artsakh, which is as ancient a part of the Armenian homeland as exists. It's been Armenian for thousands of years. It contains some of the earliest holy sites of Armenian Christianity. So they saw the timing, just like the Kemal and Enver and Cemal Pasha did back in a century ago, and they took their shot with very, very advanced militaries, fourth generation drones, massive numbers of troops, odds on the order of something like 30 to 1, 50 to 1 in terms of numbers, in terms of military spending, in terms of technology, and to take out one of the last remaining parts of the world that still contain an indigenous Armenian population. And we lost Kars and Ardahan and Dikran and Sebastian, where my family's from. All these were taken from us to the west, and now vast areas of Armenia to the east have been seized and depopulated by Azerbaijan with Turkish backing, with the backing of foreign terrorist fighters recruited by Turkey from Syria. As an Armenian, it's like heartbreaking. As an American, I'm really deeply disappointed in the U.S. response. It was articulated, I think, most honestly by the U.S. National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien, who came and met with Armenians in California during the war, and said, look, I have a lot of Armenian friends. And the first time, anytime you hear, if you're Armenian, if you hear somebody start a sentence with, I have Armenian friends, the rest of the sentence is not going to go well. And he then proceeded to say, look, we know the Armenians are the victims here. We see the aggression that's being perpetrated by Azerbaijan, but we're not going to do anything about it because that would mean that we're not neutral. And I guess in some, very narrow and I would argue twisted sense, that is neutral. If you, see 10 people beating up one person on the street and you continue walking, you can adopt a posture of I was neutral in that fight, regardless of the odds, regardless of the intent, regardless of the motives and the weapons used and the terrible suffering visited upon that one person by the 10 people. And that signal was understood very quickly by Turkey and Azerbaijan, because they now knew that there would be no response, that they could do whatever they wanted, and the U.S. policy would be, we're not going to take sides because that would forfeit our neutrality, which is ultimately, I think, what happened. To the extent that the U.S. in the past could have put the brakes on something like this, they signaled early on that there was absolutely no intent to do so. The media fell into a both sides kind of trap, which is that, both sides. It's just, who's to say that they're fighting? No one knows who started it. No one knows, what the issues are. So let's just assume that everything is equal and that we can blame both sides. It would be, like something like Pearl Harbor and saying, well, there were shots fired from both sides. Who's to say who started it? So why don't we just blame everybody and then just write it off and move on? That false neutrality certainly was prevalent in terms of our government policymakers, among our government policymakers, and also in the media, even some of the human rights groups that we look to for a strong stand. But there were many who did stand up, and IDC I count chief among those. Also, the Philos Project, thank you to Robert Nicholson and others. He collected a very large group of faith-based leaders who spoke strongly in support and in defense of Armenia against these terrible, terrible odds. Michael Rubin traveled to the region and has written very eloquently and persuasively on the subject. So that's where we are. This is not unlike 1915, where there was sympathy and there was some support, but the higher up you go in the system, the less support you got. And the feeling, I think, among Armenians is basically that, well, lesson learned, terrible, terrible lesson learned at a massive cost of upwards of 30% of the area in which Armenians are indigenous still, and but the sense of abandonment in the face of this existential threat, and which is ongoing. We still have prisoners being taken, tortured. They're being abused on social media as if it's a sport. In some places in the world, if captured, helpless civilians were being tormented, having their ears cut off or their head cut off, that might be something that the society would want to hide. But apparently in Azerbaijan and Turkey, these are points of pride, and all over social media are these terrible, terrible atrocities. We're working our best to get the prisoners back. We're working to encourage the U.S. and others to monitor the churches that have been taken. If the history of the last 100 years in Turkey is any guide, there will be some rhetoric, but very little action. Our focus right now is very much on assistance, is getting a $250 million aid package to Armenia to help with the tens of thousands, the hundreds of thousands who have been displaced by this conflict. There's been massive economic harm to Armenia's economy, and this will reverberate for years and years in Armenia. And U.S. assistance is needed where we couldn't, or where we didn't, rather, as Americans step forward to do something meaningful during the war. Perhaps we can step up now and help the widow and the orphan of this conflict. We're also taking a careful look at U.S. weapons, U.S. parts and components, technology that were discovered in the Turkish drones that Azerbaijan used to kill Armenians. These are called Bayraktar drones. Several were shot down. They were opened up, and they found 8 or 9 different components clearly labeled with component numbers of the U.S. firms, of Garmin and Xilinx and Viasat and a range of others. And we would like the Congress and the administration to look into that and to research any potential violations of U.S. law. It's one thing for Turkey and Azerbaijan to kill Armenians, and that's horrific in its own right. But one step worse when U.S. parts and technology are complicit in those deaths. So we're active on all those fronts. I know that the speakers today will speak to the situation in Iraq and Syria, and there's a lot in common here. We have basically a Turkey that is feels unrestrained in any meaningful way by the moral sentiments of the world, by the pressures of the international community. They've organized the Rubik's Cube. They've organized their geopolitics such that they can today, get the Europeans to back off, get the Americans to remain silent, get the even the Russians to join in with them in some regard, and to just exercise a vastly aggressive policy, much of it at the expense of Christians. And the in some ways we see the strength of our collective movement to stand up against this type of thing, but also in other ways we see the challenges that remain before us, because Turkey, for all the talk, and this is for all the talk about caring about the plight of Christians abroad, we didn't see any material action based on that whatsoever, and even among folks that we counted as our friends. And so, if maybe a wake-up call, painful one at a huge cost. So I wish I could share a more upbeat message this morning with you, Rich. But these are dark days for Armenians. I think for all Christians across the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Ram, for that update. As grim as it was, we appreciate you being with us and always bringing us, the knowledge that you have in that area. It certainly is a tragedy, as you discussed, but more than a tragedy, I would also say the situation is replete with war crime. In the law of armed conflict, you're probably familiar, there are a couple principles, one of which is discriminating between civilians and combatants. In military necessity, bombing a 1,000-year-old church has no meaningful military necessity. So these are just two violations of the law of armed conflict that immediately come to mind. And there will be a day, hopefully, where they will be held to account. So thank you for that update, Ram. Next, we'll shift to Michael Rubin, who's going to be talking to us about Turkey's aggressive role in Iraq, which certainly affects Assyrian, Chaldean, and Syriac Christians in the north. And also, he'll give us a more general talk about Turkey's overall geopolitical ambitions in the region overall. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you so much for having me, and I want to repeat Aram's gratitude to IDC for putting together such a great panel. I'm actually going to go beyond my mandate a little bit and just add a little bit to what Aram said based on my recent trip to Artsakh. As someone who's not Armenian, as someone who's not Christian, I just wanted to point out a couple issues which struck me that I didn't gain from reading in the United States. First of all, before I left, I had absolutely no idea that the surprise attack, the Pearl Harbor that was launched on Artsakh early on Sunday morning when people were at home with their families or in church with Turkish F-16 bombardment, drone bombardment, and so forth, a veritable blitzkrieg. It happened on the 100th anniversary of the 1920 Turkish invasion of the independent Republic of Armenia. And that was a symbolism that wasn't launched. It wasn't a one-off that occurred in 2020, but rather that symbolism, which was quite deliberate, meant to show that this was a continuation of the genocide that began a century before, rather than simply the latest manifestation of a territorial dispute. I also worry, as a policy analyst, I always look at not just what happened in the past, but what happened in the future. And one of the things that worries me most, having left Artsakh the day before the Kalbajar route was closed, is that in the ceasefire agreement, it talked about routes through the south, linking Nakhchivan to Azerbaijan proper through southern Armenia. We're not talking about disputed territory here. We're not talking about Nagorno-Karabakh. We're not talking about Artsakh. What we're talking about is a route through which Turkey can transport its troops to Azerbaijan and further afield. What I worry about, and this is picking up what we've seen in Iraq and Syria as we look to a broader strategy, is what happens if you have a situation in which a Turkish truck driver is killed along the route by a sniper. That sniper, frankly, could just as easily, if passed as precedent, have been a Turkish sniper trying to create a casus belli as anyone else. Is Turkey going to start demanding buffer zones? Are they going to have compliant diplomats like we saw inside northeastern Syria in the State Department say, hey, look, this buffer zone is legitimate, we got to counter terrorism, and suddenly Turkey makes a land grab in southern Armenia or by cutting off Armenia's only international border that isn't subject to a blockade, tighten the blockade, tighten the noose around independent Armenia. Lastly, I'm scared to death about what I heard at the victory parade last week when Erdogan talked about and thanked the Islamic Army of the Caucasus, when Aliyev talked about how Yerevan, the capital of Armenia, and Lake Sevan were occupied Azeri territory, not a legitimate state, but simply something else on the list to be reconquered. The fact of the matter is we're at the end of the beginning, not the beginning of the end. And the sort of moral equivalence which Aram talked about in terms of the US government is simply going to make things worse. As we move forward, and I will shift to Iraq in a moment, as we shift forward, we're going to have a problem with Section 907, which is of the Freedom Support Act, which has cut off in the past military assistance to Azerbaijan. There's a waiver if Azerbaijan pledges or if the United States sees that Azerbaijan is going to settle its problems diplomatically rather than militarily. Well, they're in violation of that. But what I fear is the State Department is going to say, well, we're not going to have leverage with Azerbaijan unless we recognize that, unless we waive 907 and continue to give them assistance. It really is a troublesome phenomena. But going further, we have videos of Turkish-backed Syrian militias, which in the past have terrorized Yazidis, they've terrorized Kurds, now they're terrorizing Armenians. We know that they've been chopping off ears in order to get special bonuses from Baku. They've been cutting off heads, they've been executing prisoners. We have the videos on Telegram. What are we going to do to apply Global Magnitsky Act sanctions, not only to the military commanders, but also to Aliyev, who's the commander-in-chief of the military. And lastly, when we have Syrian-backed militia, Syrian Arab militiamen, veterans of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or Daesh, who are now being transported and settling and fighting in Armenia and Azerbaijan, it's time to consider a real debate not only about whether 907 should be waived, but rather whether Azerbaijan should be considered a state sponsor of terror, Turkey as well, because Azerbaijan has shown itself to be to Turkey what Hezbollah is to Iran. Now, when it comes to Iraq, in this past couple months, I've been to Iraq, I've been to Lebanon, I've been to Armenia and Artsakh. First of all, this may not be popular given some of the activism of the Christian community, but I really do see the Iraqi government as an ally rather than an adversary in the protection of Christians. Barham Saleh, the president of Iraq, is Kurdish. Mustafa Kadhimi, the prime minister of Iraq, had his background as a human rights activist chronicling the crimes of Saddam Hussein, including the crimes of Saddam Hussein against some Christians, some secular women, some educated and so forth. That's not to say that there aren't real problems in Iraq. There are with some of the Iranian-backed militias. Not every Iranian-backed militia, however, not every Shiite militia is an Iranian-backed militia, and it's important to differentiate. It's important to recognize that the leadership in Najaf, Grand Ayatollah Ali Sistani, is not the same as Ali Khamenei, and is much more willing to not only carry out dialogue with Christians, but actually put some policy sincerity behind what we see with regard to the Shiite clergy. Now, this is where I start to worry, however. When Secretary of State Mike Pompeo talked about withdrawing from Iraq, I wasn't aware until I got to Baghdad what a cascade he was setting Iraq down upon. What I saw when I got to Baghdad was not just preparations for the US Embassy to withdraw, but also preparations from every European embassy, preparations from all the moderate Arab states like the United Arab Emirates, increasingly Jordan, increasingly even Saudi Arabia picking up and leaving, and the United Nations Assistance Mission in Iraq as well. Now, if we have that cascade of evacuation, if the Biden administration continues the desire to scale back from Iraq, who's going to fill the vacuum? When the Obama administration did this, it was Daesh, it was the Islamic State. Now people talk about if the United States creates a vacuum, it's not only going to be Iran, but it's going to be Turkey as well. that was palpable in Baghdad. It's certainly something which Nadine can talk about in Iraqi Kurdistan and northeast Syria, but we're seeing it in Baghdad as well. And to be perfectly blunt, Turkey is to the 21st century what Saudi Arabia was to the 20th. So we need to worry about that sort of radicalism coming out. Now, it's a good thing that Mustafa Kadhimi hasn't gone on a state visit to see Recep Tayyip Erdogan, despite being invited. He understands that Erdogan's goal is to humiliate. Erdogan continues to not only occupy parts of Iraq, not only Iraqi Kurdistan, but parts of Iraq proper as well. But also there is definitive proof of life that some of the Yazidis who were enslaved are not only under the control of Turkish-backed proxies in northeastern Syria, and Nadine can talk a little bit more about this, but also have been brought back to cities inside Turkey, and Turkey simply isn't releasing them. That shows more than anything else the ideology which is at play when it comes to Erdogan. I would just say in conclusion, having traveled the region, having not spent as much time nor being as much of an expert as Nadine is in terms of northeastern Syria, but certainly, or nor being as much of an expert in Armenia or Artsakh as Aram is, having been across the region, I mean, the commonality is pretty intense. The commonality of the threat that's posed by Turkey and Turkey's ideology. One of the biggest problems we have now is not only stovepiping among various diaspora communities, which is one of the reasons why In Defense of Christians is so valuable by bringing all different people, all different interests and expertises together. But within the US government, the fact that we have bureaucratic boundaries between Turkey and the Middle East, for example, or between the Caucasus and the Middle East is deeply troublesome. We need to recognize that we've got a situation in which the Turkish efforts to spread their ideology, to undermine religious freedom and so forth is spanning the entire region, and we can't be constrained by artificial boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael Rubin. We appreciate your comments. Next, I'd like to shift over to Commissioner Manzo, who recently returned from a month-long fact-finding visit in northeast Syria, where she met in a personal capacity with a number of Christian communities, as well as officials from the autonomous administration in northeast Syria. Commissioner Manzo.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to share a screen here. Hope everyone can see it okay. Thanks to In Defense of Christians again for always putting together these remarkable events. You know, one of my favorite organizations in Washington or in the world, really. I am such a fans of your work and bringing together these panelists. Michael, as always, we count on your research and your analytics and so much of the work we all do, and Sarah and Rich and Aram. It's so heartbreaking to hear the update that you shared. And Kino, good to see you again, of course. And I'm going to let him delve a little deeper into some of the topics. But I put some visuals together to kind of help because this is a complicated topic, even with visuals. So I'm hopeful that you'll find them as helpful as I think they are to me. But as it was mentioned, I just returned from a month-long trip where I was on the ground for a little over a month in Syria, and then also about a week in Iraq in my own capacity and working with a group here, Freedom Research Foundation, on the ground. And this a map is actually a Syria Live map that a lot of us use. You can just Google Syria Live and it'll give you an update of a lot of this. We actually put these labels on here just to be able to help us to be able to better explain what's going on. But this yellow part here is the Autonomous Administration of North and East Syria. And this is, of course, the regime areas. You know, I first learned about the Autonomous Administration of North and East Syria when I was appointed to the commission in May of 2018 from the staff at USRF. They've been following the Autonomous Administration and the remarkable conditions there for several years. In the summer of 2019, one of the leaders, Ilham Ahmed, came and met with us and shared about the governance and the struggles they were facing. And I just remember being with my USRF colleague, Anarima Bargova, and us stunned. I mean, we're all frankly crying, trying to understand all they had accomplished and all they were facing. And Turkey hadn't even invaded yet. So at that moment, we knew like they're onto something, but this is not going to be the easiest journey for them. But we want to be a part of it because we're amazed at the conditions that they have. Just a few months after that meeting, Turkey invaded for the third time. And you'll see this here, Operation Peace Spring, taking this land here and committing horrible atrocities against Christians, Yazidis, Kurds, women, especially minority women, including killings, rapes, kidnapping, forced conversion, extortion, the destruction of religious sites. I was able to briefly visit last November and was amazed at that point when I first started meeting people and meeting with Christian communities when I was there, and also understanding the brutal crimes that had been committed that weren't being talked about. This is a map of really the Christian breakdown and the religious breakdown of the Northeast. And as you can see, a lot of people actually mistake that it's a majority Kurdish area, but it's actually a majority Arab area now. Majority of the Syrian Democratic forces are even Arab. It really is a multi-ethnic, multi-religious area. When I visited last year, I went to Tel Tamar, which I actually visited again this time, but this is right on the front lines of where they took last year. And I met with people from the hospital who talked about how hundreds of the civilians had been killed, and Turkey had come in through a Christian area. And this area had already been decimated, frankly, from ISIS, and Christians had started to come back again when Turkey invaded last year and caused these atrocities. Of course, the Turkish newspapers reported it as they annihilated terrorists, because they, of course, consider every civilian that lives anywhere in Northeast Syria to be a terrorist. And so on my recent trip, the reason I went was really a couple of different reasons. The first is I wanted to understand how they built this governance that has created these conditions for religious freedom and gender equality in the Middle East. And I wanted to understand the difference between the Kurdish areas and the Arab areas. I'd been told by some government officials that there really isn't governance in the Arab areas, which I found to be not at all the case. And I also wanted to understand the condition here for these different religious minority communities, and wanted to also draw attention to the areas that Turkey had invaded, the crimes that are being committed, that we're hearing about at USERF, that we're all hearing about in all these independent reports, but yet the media and most people are completely unaware of it. So first I want to talk about a little bit about the Autonomous Administration of North and East Syria. And I know Kino is more of an expert and obviously can talk about this too, but I just want to show you the seal. They have 3 languages, the Syriac language, and Arabic and Kurdish. And it's really remarkable that the multi-ethnic, multi-religious approach and how they said it, they embedded it in every level of government was really the one thing that probably surprised me the most. This is the 7 regions that they have of the government. Afrin right now is under the control of Turkey and its forces, so they don't really, unfortunately, it's the worst conditions, because Turkey has obviously been there the longest. But what I wanted to understand was, how they became this. And I just want to talk a little bit about, what most of us know more about the Syrian Democratic Forces because of the legendary fight against ISIS. They were our boots on the ground. But what most people don't know is the U.S. tried to not work with the Kurds because they knew it would make Turkey angry. So what they did is they spent $1 million building the Free Syrian Army to fight ISIS. And of course, it ended up being a complete disaster because these soldiers were sympathetic to ISIS, so they obviously weren't going to fight ISIS. If it sounds familiar, it's because they're currently Turkey's army. They're the ones that are coming in with them and committing all these atrocities in these areas we showed you earlier. The U.S. ended up scrapping that and working with the YPG and the YPJ, and together they formed the Syrian Democratic Forces along with the Syriac Military Council, the women's forces, the Arab forces, and put together this amazing defense against ISIS that I think more people are familiar with. I think what I didn't understand is after, they started with the self-governance in 2011, after, when people started rising up against Assad, is they started in just these 3 areas, Afrin, Kobani, and then over here in Al Jazeera. But as they would free an area from ISIS, when an area was liberated, like in Manbij, I met with people telling me the story of when it was freed from ISIS. I was here talking to Arabs that talked about before ISIS, they lived in a very conservative environment. When ISIS came, they learned that ISIS they did not represent their faith. And so when ISIS left, self-governance started, and they started getting involved in it. And hearing the women tell the story was really remarkable, how they, before ISIS, never were able to leave their homes without a guardian. And of course, ISIS came and changed everything for several years, and a lot of them suffered as well. And then when the Autonomous Administration started setting up governance, their families were comfortable with them playing a part, and some of them are co-chairmen and have a lot of important positions. And it was neat to see how they even shared how that governance didn't destroy or ruin the traditional community that they're part of, which I think is also telling that the governance works in these different communities so well. And so I wanted to just show that this is, the ISIS caliphate. So some of the areas in the Kurdish areas were never part of it, but just kind of give you a sense of this is what this government built in the middle of a civil war, and while fighting these guys is how they put this governance together. And this is what the governance looks like. So, so what they would do is they'd go into an area and they would set up a commune, which is about 100 to 120 families, a lot more in cities, a lot less in rural areas. And they would get a co-chairman, a man and a woman co-chairman. And then they would set up these committees here. So you see like social affairs and labor, education, women, economy, finance, youth, and they'd have co-chairmen of those committees, and they started meeting their own needs as a community. And then they put several communes together to make a sub-district, and then several sub-districts to make a district, and a canton, and it goes all the way up to the regional government. And then here it kind of shows you the executive council of the regional government, as well as a autonomous administration of North and East Syria. They're all kind of set up the same. They become commissions at the autonomous level. And then the offices, which are important to note that the offices are part of a future Syria. So the autonomous administration is not a separatist movement. It's always been the plan to be a state in a future Syria. So these would be under basically a future. And this here is an important part. This is a part of the social contract, and you can see the beautiful language here. How they talk about freedom of religion or belief and gender equality. It's funny because someone said about this being propaganda, and I had to just laugh because unlike a lot of corporations in America that do a lot of the gender equality or a lot of programs just for show, no one's looking, no one's watching. I mean, American hasn't stepped foot, American official in Kobani or Manbij in like a year and a half. So, these are what they put together in order to build what they've built by including, these areas, by including all of the different ethnicities. We found that so what we did is we went into each, 3 of the regions, and I showed up kind of unannounced and met with all the different offices and the co-chairmen and found out their story and heard what they did and how it all worked. And the one thing that was really interesting is you'd find the co-chairman would be like a Christian and an Arab, or a Kurd and an Arab, or then a Turkmen and an Armenian. It was like the breakdown of the co-chairs and the vice chairs were almost always different ethnicities and religions, and that's like a really important part of the embracing that multi-ethnic, multi-religious. Again, this goes through their principles and visions. I just pulled up some of the things that they believe in. People are elected, and the areas that have been around the longest, people actually elected to the co-chair positions and elected to co-chairs of even the committees. And so this is a democracy, this is representative government, but it's bottoms up approach from the commune level all the way on up, and has an important, and this is really changed the way that women are treated, because half of all the leaders, of course, are women. And I think that is super important. And so just going back here, I just wanted to point out again, the Christian areas and how important, the other thing I wanted to understand was really what it was like for the religious minorities to live here in Northeast Syria. Some of the Christian community, of course, are very involved in the autonomous administration. Some Christians support the Syrian opposition. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. And they do so because America asked them to, because America has always supported the Syrian opposition. So a lot of them think that they're doing the right thing by supporting them. But even those that support the Syrian opposition as the answer for Syria had to admit that the conditions are favorable and positive, and they're thankful for the conditions the autonomous administration has put out. The one thing that surprised me that I learned about the Christian community was how afraid they all are of Assad coming back. Because the way it works with Assad has made a deal with Christians in Syria that he'll say he'll be their protector as long as they're loyal to him. But if you live in an area that is governed by the opposition in any way, either in the regime areas or here, he looks at it as if you stayed there, that means you're disloyal. So there's a sense that if somehow this project failed and Assad came back, that the Christians would be the first ones that would be targeted. And that was really chilling, that how pervasive that fear was throughout the country. I wanted to talk a little bit too about a small percentage of the Christians. Most of the Christians, of course, are Syriac and Syrian, and I did meet some Armenian Christians as well. But the Kurdish Christians who are converts is a really small part of the Christian community, but an important one, because as you probably know, every other country in the Middle East will not allow people to change a religion from being a Muslim to a Christian. And in Northeast Syria, they actually have their own churches. and have been welcome. And so that was, important for me. And I was really pleased to be able to visit with them. I also wanted to talk about the Arab areas a little bit. I was able to spend some time in Tabqa and Manbij and Raqqa. And, there aren't a lot of Christians in these areas. Most of them left during the fight against ISIS. And this is in Tabqa, where we met with the executive council, the co-chairs, and some of the members of the committees. And they were sharing the story about this particular church, that in Tabqa, there are only 7 Christian families that have come back. And they have 25 other families. Their houses are empty, and the government has preserved their houses waiting for these Christians to return. And so what they did, this church was destroyed, the cross was taken down. Actually, ISIS used this church as their headquarters in Tabqa. And so what the government did is they lifted this cross here above the destroyed church in the middle of town to, first of all, send a signal to the community that Christians are welcome in their community, but also a signal to Christians that they're welcome to return. This church here, this is the basement, and this is the tunnel here they took me to. That actually was as a torture chamber that ISIS used for members of their society. So, this is what these folks have overcome. That is just remarkable. We talked about the Yazidi community. They were very protected during the war against ISIS by the Syrian Democratic Forces, YPG, the Syriac Military Council. There's always been a real sense of both the Kurdish Christians to protect the Yazidi community in Syria. Unfortunately, in the areas that Turkey is occupied now, the Yazidi community has been targeted in a horrific way. Yazidi women have been kidnapped. There have been just horrific crimes against them, there's a lot of documentation about this. But it was really special for me to meet these people. Most of them had fled from Afrin or Serikani, and were able to tell their stories, which of course were really heartbreaking. Want to talk a little bit about, we talked about Turkey's role in all this. We did a hearing in June that you can find at usurf.gov called Safeguarding Religious Freedom in Northeast Syria. And Michael was a part of that panel. Thank you, Michael. But, we in this hearing, we did document, first of all, the conditions that are so favorable for religious minorities there, but also the atrocities that have been committed against religious minorities here. And there are so many reports that have come out either before or after our hearing. Amnesty International has done a report, Human Rights Watch has done a report, and of course the United Nations did a report, chastising Turkey, which was a surprise, and talking about the horrible crimes that have been committed. Genocide Watch has called these crimes against humanity and war crimes, and is called on action as well. This is certainly undisputed now, the situation that's gone on in these areas that Turkey occupies, yet the international community is looking away. And so that was one of the reasons I came, is I was able to do a lot of press, be able to draw a lot of attention to the reality that's going there, that was really troubling. I think USURF, excuse me, one of the interesting things I learned when I got to Northeast Syria is that people were very familiar with the work we've done at USURF. And I think more people in Northeast Syria know USURF than people in Washington, D.C. And so our recommendations have really been embraced by the people of Northeast Syria. I heard people all over the area, wherever I traveled, that would thank me for what we've done at USURF, and also talk about the need for recognition. And so these recommendations that USURF put out are really solid. They were based on a lot of good information from the ground. They pressure Turkey to withdraw, recognize the autonomous administration as a legitimate local government, expand engagement with the autonomous administration. Currently, the U.S. government does not engage directly with the government. Lift sanctions from all the area that it governs. This is an important point here. Northeast Syria is a conservative's dream. They don't need nation building. They don't need a lot of help. What they need is for us to let them build their own government. They have 80% of the oil, fertile soil, and people willing to do the work. What they need is to be able to have that space to do that. We also and one of our important recommendations is to demand the inclusion of the autonomous administration. They're currently not a part of a final solution. The U.S. policy does not include them as a future Syria. And so I wanted to point this out to you real quick. When I was going on the border doing press conferences every day about the conditions in the areas that Turkey is occupied, the Syrian opposition president actually went to Kobani, and there's an article about it here, and he declared that those conditions were excellent, which we know Afrin, I'm sorry, went to Afrin, I didn't say Kobani. I was in Kobani, he went to Afrin, and he announced that these conditions were favorable. Sorry about that. And so let me just get back to that real quick. And so, this is such an important point here, because this man right here his name is Hamin Abu Shagra, and he was present during the killing of Kurdish politician Hevrin Khalif, which a lot of us remember when Turkey invaded, that horrible video that was of her being pulled from a car. So this is a picture of the Syrian opposition. This is a picture of US policy. This is what we support. This is the man sitting right here who visited Afrin and announced that conditions were excellent for religious minorities. And this is the man here that was present when this Hevrin Khalif was murdered. And so, this new information, I think, is important for us to acknowledge that as we learn information, we need to change policy. For the US answer for Syria cannot be the Turkish-backed Syrian opposition coalition. They don't share our values, they share Turkey's values. And so this is something, that's very concerning to us. So I think that, the US excuse for not supporting Northeast Syria and the autonomous administration in the past has been, we can't anger Turkey. And I think we're at the point, and we've seen that with these new sanctions, that is no longer a valid excuse. So I would just like to say that, these USURF recommendations is really the way forward for Northeast Syria, and they're an easy lift for the US government. So we really are hopeful that we've seen some movement. We know that Congress is with us now on these. So we're really hopeful that this year there'll be some movement to support the autonomous administration in Northeast Syria. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. We appreciate that. That was a particularly comprehensive deep dive, probably one of the most comprehensive I've seen with regard to the actual organizational structure at every level of the autonomous administration. So we do appreciate that. Thank you. Next, I'd like to shift over to Kino Gabriel, the SDF spokesperson, who joins us today live from Northeast Syria, and he'll be speaking more about Turkish aggression toward the autonomous administration. Welcome, Kino.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you all for having me here today and for giving me this opportunity. Of course, I think Nadine, thanks to her a lot, also covered a lot of the points that I wanted to talk about the administration of North and East Syria. And the work, I think, I wouldn't have been able to talk about it the same as she did, and I think it did it better than me. So for starters, I think I would like to say, and I was part of the creation of the democratic administration of North and East Syria, of course, back in 2014, when I wasn't still in the military. And I think it's safe to say that the democratic administration, since its beginning, included and represented the thought and the rights of the several different ethnic and religious groups within its territory. We have been part of, as Christians, we have been part of different committees that participated in the creation of the administration. And I think basically the social contract that we have as a constitution for the administration is a representative of everything that we believe in, that we work for. And I think some of it that was shown by Nadine clearly shows that. And I think that is one of the best examples that we have in the Middle East about Christian communities being able to govern themselves, to be part of the administration that govern their areas, and to be part of the decision-making process all over the way. I think also to mention it, since the beginning, I think we worked very hard on inclusivity for the different ethnic and religious groups. I think it's safe to say that since the beginning of the administration, it was almost that we wanted to represent the administration through those diverse and different pictures or different colors that we have within the administration. Whenever we had, let's say, Syriac and Arab co-presidents of any committee of our administration, the vice president was going to be Kurdish. Whenever it is Kurdish and Arab, the vice president is Syriac, and so on. I think we worked very hard regarding this matter since the beginning, and we managed to do it. The same goes, of course, for the military commanders and the military forces currently called the Syrian Democratic Forces. But as different groups, we started working together long before the Syrian Democratic Forces were created, and jointly created those forces in order also to represent the different ethnic and religious groups within North and East Syria. And also together we have been able to fight different terrorist organizations. The last of them were ISIS, and also to defend against the Turkish aggression and occupation of Syrian territories. Of course, I think it's safe to say that together the different ethnic and religious groups sacrificed everything that they have in order to preserve their right of self-governance, and to some level we managed to accomplish that. Eventually, I think with the case of the Turkish aggression and the Turkish military operations against the areas of the administration of North and East Syria, especially in Afrin and in northeast Syria, in Tal Abyad and Ras Al Ain, and even also in other areas that were previously occupied by Turkey, especially in Jarablus, Al Bab, and Azaz, which are also Syrian territories. We defended together against those attacks, and I think it was due to international conflict of interest that we didn't receive the necessary support in order to stand against Turkey with its, of course, far-reaching military technology and weaponry and etc. So with what we had back then, and I think it was basically our will to defend ourselves, our families, our land, and our way of life. We managed to defend those that we love for as long as we managed to do it till we, I think, broke up in Afrin, and also till we reached or forced Turkey to reach agreements with the US government and the Russian government in order to cease fire in North and East Syria. So eventually, I think, as Nadine said, we need political support mainly. We need to be recognized as an administration, as forces who jointly with the international coalition defeated ISIS. This recognition, I think, is the first step and the basic step that we need in order to be able to build our country, to build our areas, and to build our administration into being better and better. Coming back for the first point that I started with the administration and its creation, eventually I think it's a clear, I think, example of a joint life for different ethnic groups. How should it be? Of course, for Christian communities who have been oppressed throughout the Middle East in general, it is something new. Of course, beside Lebanon, when the Christians had a great or big number of population and were part of the administration and governance for as long as Lebanon was created. But for other parts of the Middle East, I think the administration is a new representation of how the Christian community can share and take part of such governance. And I think similar experiments should be supported in other parts, either it is Turkey or mainly, of course, I would mention Iraq, where we also have some similar situation. Of course, the Christian community there didn't reach the level of self-governance, but it is something that we ask for, and it is something that I think should happen. The same that it happened for the Kurds in northern Iraq, it should happen for the Christian community also, mainly in Nineveh Plain, at least, which is an area of main Christian community present, and I think they can do it. They just need also some political support towards such move and such a step, and eventually it would happen, and it would work, and it would be, I think, a success for preserving the Christian community in the area. Of course, the same goes for I think the Yazidis in Iraq also have similar situation, and I think such example or such experience would benefit them hugely also. I think for us as Christian community in Syria also, the administration is very important. As I said first, it's the first time that we govern ourselves, and without it, I think we are going just to go back to where we were before 2011, just a religious community living on the sides of the community in Syria. In the media, in propaganda, we were used as a card in order to publicize the Syrian regime with its with the picture that they drew, like they are protecting Christians, they are providing them with their rights. Eventually, it is true to some level, but they didn't protect us. The Syrian people did that. It's not that we got all our rights. The Syrian constitution contradicts with the saying that as Christian community we have all our rights. If as Christian community we want our full rights as Syriacs, as Christians in Syria, we would need a constitution similar to the social contract that we have in North and East Syria. We would need a constitution that the Syriac and Christian community takes part in creating it, in writing it, not just being written and enforced over us. So for that, I think the administration is a clear representation of what the Syriac and Christian communities can do, and how they can be effective in governing themselves and working together with other ethnic and religious groups in order to create such a success story and experiment. So for us, I think that is the base, and we would like more support for this administration that we have in order to be recognized, and eventually everything will feel in order. As for the Turkish aggression, again, I would like to emphasize on the talk that my friends here have done since the beginning. It is something not only related to one area. We are seeing Turkey moving around in the whole area, whether it is the Middle East, in Syria, Iraq, or it is in Africa with Libya, and even some other countries like Sudan, Somalia, and others, and also in the Caucasus with the situation that happened in Artsakh. So Turkey has, I think, a goal in order to expand its territory and expand its interest over the interest of the people of those countries, of those communities, and that is what we have seen so far. And I think we saw it firsthand, and we were in the front lines watching what the Turkish aggression and the Turkish attacks are doing to the communities, whether it is on the humanitarian side. We have seen, especially in Syria and the latest attack that happened, we have seen more than 300,000 people displaced from their homes, almost 1,500 families from the Christian community also were displaced because they left either in Ras Al Ain and some of them in Tel Abyad, or they were living in border areas and had to evacuate. We have seen the let's say, capture of towns where the Syriac and Christian communities was living in a very good way, especially in Ras Al Ain, where we lost a lot of houses, we lost, or a lot of families lost their homes and their neighborhoods, and eventually they lost their lands and their crops. So it was very devastating for them also. And eventually, I think the Turkish attack affected not only the Christian community, but also the Arab community was, I think, the most community attacked because it lived and it was the main population of Tel Abyad and Ras Al Ain, also the Kurdish community, the Yazidis, almost all the ethnic and religious groups who live in Syria. I think they left in those two cities. We had Armenians also, we had Cherkess, and we had others. So everyone was there and everyone was affected by this Turkish aggression. And eventually, I think we would need some more steps from the US administration, as we are working together through the international coalition in order to prevent Turkey from having another operation and another green light for attacks over new territories in Syria or other ways. Currently, I think it's safe to say that personally, I have received reports that Turkey is trying to build some kind of checkpoints, or let's say some small bases on the Iraqi side of the Syrian-Iraqi border through Simalka. I think it's an attempt. If it is true, I haven't been able to confront it, to affirm those reports yet. But if it is true, it is another way from Turkey to put us under some kind of a siege and to strengthen its grab over our areas. And eventually, with what is happening at the current time, we might see another operation and another attack, because so far and during the last almost 15 days, we are seeing an increase in the attack level from Turkey against us in the area of Ain Isa, which is at the southwest of the territory that it controls currently in Syria. And there might be another operation or attempt to capture it, would make our situation more complicated. Also, from the other side, there is a continuous threat of attacks in Tel Tamar, which are populated mostly by Syria Christian community, and they were affected by ISIS through kidnapping and killing. And if so, and if those attacks are happening again, it is going to affect those communities also after relatively peaceful time, after we liberated those areas from ISIS. So Turkey is a threat. Turkey is a continuous problem, I think, for everyone. It is a problem for the communities in the region, for the governments of the region, and also I think it is a problem for the European Union, for the US, and I think some of the steps that were taken through sanctions, both from EU and from the US recently, I think they were good steps, and I think we would need to see some more hard lines drawn around Turkey in order to push it to its level and to its borders, and to prevent it from attacking and destroying more lives and more rights of more people. Thank you. I hope I didn't make it long. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kino. I appreciate your comments. You mentioned a number of cities there. You mentioned Ras Al Ain, Rishaino, Qamishli, Derik, and a couple of others in northeast Syria. What many people may not realize about these towns that you mentioned is that they're more than just cities. They're actually symbols of Christian survival and religious pluralism in northeast Syria. Just to provide a little added historical context. Prior to the 1920s, as I'm sure you're aware, for example, the city of Qamishli did not exist other than just a bunch of small Christian villages prior to 1920. The establishment of Qamishli was by and for Syriac Christians who were survivors of the 1915 genocide who escaped Turkey with their lives. And for the century that followed, like you mentioned, Qamishli and these other towns in the northeast became places where Christians, Arabs, Kurds, Yazidis lived a peaceful coexistence. The tragic irony of history, however, is today these same towns that were founded by survivors of genocide are fending off Turkish aggression once again. And like you said, they're mounting over the last couple of weeks to launch another full-scale attack like we saw in October of 2019. So this is very troubling given the historical context and the symmetry of it all, as tragic as it is. So it's certainly something to ponder. But we thank you for your comments, and we thank all of you for your comments. And at this point in the program, I think we're going to move on to the question and answer portion. And the first question is for Michael. It's so fortuitous, Michael, that we have you with us today, because it just so happens that just a couple days ago on Monday, the U.S. announced sanctions against Turkey for its purchase of the S-400, the Russian anti-aircraft weapon system, in accordance with CATSA, which is the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. As far as I know, from what I've read thus far, the sanctions essentially just target the Turkish acquisition and procurement, military procurement industry agency and its leadership. So my question for you, Michael, is: do these sanctions go far enough? Will they be effective? And if not, what would you have liked to see?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question, Richard. When it comes to the Castro sanctions, we really didn't go far enough. On one hand, we sanctioned the specific body involved with the purchase of the S-400, but let's not kid ourselves. If you look at the Turkish wire diagram of hierarchy, that institution actually answers to the Turkish presidency. And again, therefore, it seems that the sanctions would be better placed upon the Turkish president. Unfortunately, it seems that both under Trump, Obama before him, and Bush before that, Recep Tayyip Erdogan has had some sort of bizarre get-out-of-jail-free card. We'll see whether that continues with regard to a Biden administration. That said, the very fact that Congress, with a veto-proof majority, decided to force these sanctions at a time when the White House and the State Department was dragging its feet is positive. And even if the sanctions are limited, what they do is make Turkey poisonous for investors. And that, I think, is actually going to be a far more reaching impact of the sanctions than the actual designation of specific individuals.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. And just before we move on, I have one more question for you, actually. I understand you were just recently also in Lebanon. We know that Turkey is also looking to infiltrate and galvanize the Sunni population in northern Lebanon to serve as sort of a counterbalance to the Hezbollah hegemony in, throughout Lebanon, essentially. How does this stand to affect the dynamic in the region in Lebanon as well as in the greater region?
Well, that was actually one of the main questions I was looking at when I went north. I spent a lot of time in Tripoli, Lebanon, and its environs. And while certainly in both some areas of Tripoli, there were posters of Recep Tayyip Erdogan, they may have given away a little bit too much because they also had him in the same poster as Saddam Hussein. But the influence wasn't as great as I was expecting. That said, the mentality in Lebanon right now is a pox on all the elites, not just Hezbollah, not just Hassan Nasrallah, but also Samir Jaja, for example, the head of the Lebanese forces, and others, Nabi Berri, and especially his wife, who are implemented in corruption and so forth. And there's an expectation that the Lebanese economy could collapse. What I would be most worried about, should the Lebanese economy collapse, that Turkey will be in there to throw them a lifeline, although there's no such thing as an altruistic lifeline when it comes from Turkey. There will be strings attached, and Turkey might utilize those strings in order to, if you will, import their ideology into Lebanon, which would further destabilize the country in the long run.
Thank you very much. I'd like to shift to Commissioner Manza. You've certainly been a strong advocate, and your brief today included your advocacy for the inclusion of the autonomous administration and the UN-backed negotiations. So my question for you, Commissioner, is what role should the AANES play in 2254 negotiations, and what role do you envision the autonomous administration to play in a future Syria once the dust settles?
Right. So currently, UN Resolution 2254 has the Syria support group. I laugh because I'm going to say the names of these countries as being these countries are going to have a say in a future Syria, and they did this kind of a similar type process for Libya. We know how well that turned out. And so you're basically the International Syria Support Group is China, Russia, Iran, Turkey. All these countries having a seat at the table in planning for a new Syria. There was a senior government official who had dissed the autonomous administration, saying they were going to use this process to create a government better than the autonomous administration for all of Syria. And you just wonder where these ideas come from, that these governments that don't share our values are going to create a government that is going to be stable and that is going to have legitimacy with their people. So we at USURF has recommended that the U.S. demand their inclusion. We do know that it could be vetoed, for instance, by Turkey. And if so, there's other options. The U.S. could do a parallel process where they take them through and take them with them to all the meetings anyway. There's all sorts of things. The U.S. has a lot of power in this if they choose to use it. But for the government that has successfully, the only successful government in Syria that's certainly governing a third of the country, to be excluded from talking about a future Syria is ridiculous. So to be practical, I think that the basis should be we should allow them to become strong. We should support them so that they can build their own government, like we mentioned earlier, lift things and things like that. And then what will happen is, they're going to become stronger. Assad's going to continue to become weaker. And I think the basis for the autonomous administration is to be a state in a future Syria. So the political solution would be perhaps a federal Syria with different areas that are autonomous. But either way, they should have a seat at the table in these discussions. They've earned the seat, and the U.S. should demand that they have that.
Thank you. You've also presented the exemption of the autonomous administration from U.S. imposed sanctions while still keeping the tight grip on the Assad regime in Syria. Could you please explain for the viewers in what ways, measurable, tangible, what ways would this benefit and progress U.S. interests in the region?
Sure. So currently there are executive sanctions on all of Syria. So it'd be really simple for the president to just sign an executive order lifting sanctions from just northeast Syria. What that would allow them to do is be able to just have business and to be able to conduct business without all of the onerous restrictions on businesses. Right now, there also are Caesar sanctions on the country, and the autonomous administration has also made the request to the U.S. government to ensure that those don't hurt the autonomous administration, but they have. Because the Caesar sanctions, while they go after the Assad regime, what they've done is they've tanked the currency, and that has had a big impact on the government of Northeast Syria's ability to pay for things. So we keep doing all these harsh things to Assad for good reason, because we all know Assad is a bad player. He doesn't care about his people, he doesn't represent his people. But we also, if you really want to be harsh on Assad, lifting sanctions on Northeast Syria would be the way, that would be the hammer down on him, because all those businesses would rush across the border to be in a more stable place, in a place where they wouldn't have those burdens on them. So there's a lot of good reasons that the U.S. benefits, and it doesn't cost the U.S. anything. These are easy things for the U.S. to do that would ensure that the autonomous administration would be able to continue to be this refuge for religious minorities, and really for people to be able to just have freedom, which certainly supports U.S. values.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And for Kino Gabriel, the question for you is pretty much the same question I previously asked Commissioner Manza, but I'd like to hear your perspective as the SDF spokesperson. So what role does the autonomous administration leadership hope to play in a future Syria after the dust settles?
Well, I think from our perspective, we would like to have a role in creating the future of Syria, which is, I think, happening now. We are currently excluded from every official talks and negotiations regarding Syria. We are excluded from the Geneva talks. We are excluded from the committee to write the constitution for Syria, and almost from everywhere. And I don't know how it is happening. Of course, we understand it is mainly the effect of Turkey refusing our participation since the beginning, and also maybe other groups and countries falling for those forces from Turkey, and maybe others who have their interest in keeping us out. But I don't know. I don't understand how the UN doesn't include the administration that controls almost 30% of Syria and governs over almost 5 million people. I don't know how we are excluded, but again, we would like to be part of the committee to write the new constitution of Syria. We would like to be part of the Geneva talks and any negotiations that are happening for a political solution for Syria that we believe in. Eventually, we have our ideas, we have our proposals, and we have our already experience in administration. And I think our main idea is that this experience that we have is suitable for all Syria, because each Syrian territory and each Syrian part and region has its own diverse ethnic and religious groups and its ethnic and religious diversity. And if the way of governance of the administration of North and East Syria is implemented, each area is going to have more ability to govern over itself with some kind of connection to the central government in Damascus. And this way, I think we would have eliminated big part of the problems that we faced beforehand in Syria through fascist mentality and the Ba'ath party that ruled all over Syria with or through the forcing of one identity over every ethnic group in Syria. So in this way, the central government is going to be responsible for general tasks like defense, foreign affairs, etc. And the local governments are going to have more ability to do the work that is needed through education, economy, security, etc. And this way, we are going to solve a lot of problems that the Syrian people was facing beforehand. And we hope that with the developments that are happening in the region and in Syria also, that we might have this ability to be part of those talks and those negotiations regarding the future of Syria.
Thank you. And Kino, as you're probably aware, January 20th, just a couple weeks from now, is Inauguration Day. We're going to have a new president, President Biden. If you could have a phone call, a 2-minute to 3-minute phone call with President Biden, how would you advise him with regard to Turkey's aggression occurring right now in Syria?
I would like, I think, to say that he shouldn't fall for the U.S. interests with Turkey. I know that they are old allies together, but again, Turkey now isn't the same as Turkey 20 years from before, and currently it has different policies and that are damaging the whole area, and they are mainly damaging the U.S. interest in the Middle East. For us, if we have the chance, I think we can be great allies for the U.S. government and great allies for the U.S. people, and I think together we can build over the experience and the joint work that we have done together with the U.S. Army and the representatives of the U.S. government in North and East Syria, and we can accomplish much more than we have done through the last 2 or 3 years, basically.
Thank you. And Aram, I got to ask, January 20th, you have a phone call with President Biden. What's that going to sound like? Oh, I think you're on mute.
I think our first request would be for urgent humanitarian assistance, upwards of $250 million to help refugees who are homeless and meet the immediate needs, the return of prisoners and the monitoring of churches. But more broadly, I mean, this is, he knows the issue very well. And the fact of the matter is, Turkey and the United States play extremely different games. Turkey's game is to expand its power and influence in the region at the expense of its neighbors, at the expense even of its own population, and does so in a very aggressive way, pushing the limits constantly. And the U.S. policy is, well, let's not lose Turkey, and it's a maintenance policy. So when those two games are being played, Turkey wins inevitably, because the U.S. side is always like wrestling with itself. Should we? Shouldn't we? Should we take 4 years to enforce the CAATSA sanctions when there's 28 days left in the administration? And then if we do this, will Turkey do that? And Turkey holds every card in that equation. We've never really dealt with Turkey on the basis of our relative strengths. And the U.S. is obviously a much more powerful actor, controls financial markets to a much greater degree, is able to control access to capital and markets and all that. But the U.S. never plays those cards. The U.S. is always in that tortured, how can we keep them in the fold? And I know they're bad, but it could get worse. And if they're doing the right thing, well, we got to reward it. If they're doing the wrong thing, we can't lose them. So I would just say, recognize that Turkey, about 10 years ago or so, made a hard decision to go its own way, and that it's not we're still operating in the world in which we think Turkey is the ally that can be saved, or the alliance that can be salvaged in some fashion. And Erdogan knows that's not true. He walked away from the alliance a long time ago, and only now is the United States, in some very halting and hesitant way, finally getting around to that. So I would just say, deal with Turkey the way you would deal with any other regional power that's not an ally.
Thank you, Ram. I appreciate that. We have a question that came from a viewer. Let's see here. What is the future of Afrin, the city of Afrin, in the next 4 years under the new American administration? I think there are a few folks that might be able to take this. Let me go ahead and give this to Commissioner Manza to weigh in, and then maybe we can go to Mr. Michael Rubin.
Sure. So Afrin, Turkey has been occupying and governing since January 2018, and the conditions there are really horrible. We talked about Kurdish Christians earlier, and now they've begun arresting Muslim converts to Christianity, older people that had converted decades before. For instance, one gentleman was arrested for having a Christian funeral for his wife, and they both had converted Christianity many, many years before. So what we're seeing right now is they're clamping down even worse on the converts, which is of course the exact opposite as the conditions under the autonomous administration. USERP has recommended that the U.S. government ask Turkey to present a timeline to withdraw. We know Turkey doesn't want to withdraw. It's not going to be an easy thing. The only future for Afrin is really for the U.S. government to push them to withdraw, because the conditions there are really just so horrible. They've destroyed all the Yazidi religious sites, pushed Yazidis out of, and in fact even built religious sites on them, taking people's homes and turning them into religious institutes. And so there's no easy answer for how to push them back, but that really is the only answer. I understand Afrin was untouched by the civil war. I'm told it was the most beautiful city of all of Syria. And it's really heartbreaking to know that it has been turned into what it has been by Turkey and its Islamist allies.
Thank you, Commissioner. Michael, anything to add to that?
I would just add very briefly, I certainly agree with what the Commissioner said. Look, if we look at the broader pattern, we have a situation in which Turkey will say two things. Or do and say two things. First of all, they will say that they are creating a safe area for return of refugees, but if that's based upon the expulsion of the existing population, it's not about refugee resettlement, it's about ethnic cleansing. And we need to call it what it is. Second, and by the way, in Artsakh, in southern Artsakh, there's disturbing reports that a lot of these Syrian mercenaries, which Azerbaijan and Turkey utilized, are now settling in southern Artsakh in order to change the population. Turkey's playing demographic games. They're playing it in Kurdish areas, not only in Syria, but in Turkey itself, as they settle Syrian Arab refugees and give them Turkish passports and so forth. The other thing we need to recognize when it comes to Turkey and its refusal to abide by borders or to acknowledge the sanctity of borders, we've got situations in northern Cyprus, for example, in which Turkey has now been occupying zones for 45 years. The simple fact, as we look towards the incoming Biden administration, is if we get mired down in process, then it simply gets harder to resolve the situation. When Turkey is intent on ethnic cleansing, as they are in Afrin, the best possible situation is to reverse Turkey's attempts at changing the status quo as early as possible. And I would just add, if I may, to what Aram had said, there doesn't seem to be an understanding when there's countries with an understanding in the State Department with countries like Turkey, like Iran, like North Korea, that this sort of effort at this sort of desire to appease isn't seen as a pathway to solution. It's seen as weakness to continue to exploit. What we see, and we certainly saw this in the case of Pastor Andrew Brunson, when we stand up to Turkey, when we impose sanctions directly that have the support of Congress and the Oval Office, Erdogan backs down. That's the strategy that needs to be taken in Afrin and Artsakh and elsewhere.
Thank you. Another question that's just come through. I'll give it to Oram. Given Turkey's extreme aggression, blatant disregard for diplomacy and human rights, and indifference in core values, should Turkey still be a NATO member? Oram. I think you need to unmute yourself, Oram.
No, Turkey should not be in NATO. I think that's a decision that I think Turkey made a long time ago. It's not like some value judgment that others are imposing upon Turkey. Turkey decided a long time ago it would abandon its role as kind of a reliable ally to the West, a reliable flank for NATO, and they decided that and very openly said so. This is the thing about Turkey, is that like they have made no secret of their ambitions and their interests and the restraints that they feel that they need to operate under. And we are today still operating under old rules, under like 1950s, 1960s, 1970s rules, trying to recreate maybe a past that never even existed. And Turkey's off doing its own thing. So Turkey left NATO functionally long ago. Still has the benefits of membership, but they left in terms of bringing any value to the alliance a long time ago. I think they're a net liability for the alliance.
Thank you for that. As we approach the end of our program today, I want to thank you all and really tell you how interesting the conversation was and always is, and it's not a surprise to me whatsoever, given the cast that we have with us today. So thank you. Before we close, I just want to go around the table and 2 minutes for each member of the panel to fire off any saved rounds or share any parting thoughts. So we'll go ahead and start with you, Commissioner Manza.
First, I want to thank you again for letting me be a part of this important event, my panelists for just such fascinating information. And I just want to encourage those who are watching, you have a lot of power out there. Those of you on social media, those that you have influence in the world you're in. And when you find information that you think is important in these stories that you're hearing, for you to amplify these stories is the key to these people that live in these areas being able to have a future, and whether it be the atrocities you're hearing about Turkey committing or the positive stories about the conditions, if these things resonate with you, then we just encourage you to tell these stories, help us to get the word out to people that this matters to Americans. It should matter to Americans, it should matter to Christians, it should matter to people who care about human rights. And really, it takes a big team in order to get this information out. So thanks to all of you for joining us today.
Thanks for joining us, Commissioner. Michael, if you could take a few minutes to share parting thoughts.
I would just second what the commissioner had said. Certainly, what frustrates me is that I see Turkey replicating the same strategy in different areas. There needs to be greater awareness and coalition building to show that Turkey is going to be shut down wherever it is as it tries to fundamentally destabilize the areas around its borders and also attack the post-World War II liberal order. The other issue I would say is in all our work, we come up with to opposition, people who disagree with us, people who will parrot Turkey's insincere approaches, that their actions are motivated by terrorism and so forth. What I would urge is not to demonize the people that do that, but to convince them they're wrong, because the goal shouldn't be ad hominem personal attacks. The goal should be cold, dispassionate use of facts to engage people and show them that they're mistaken and set them on a different path.
Thank you, Michael. Kino, thanks for joining us. Any final thoughts for the group?
Yeah, thank you, Richard, and I think thank you everyone for giving me this chance to talk. I think I wouldn't repeat the same talk about Turkey. I think everyone knows the damage that it does to the area, but also I would like to shift a little bit also to Iran, not to forget that both Turkey and Iran are implementing the same tactics, the same strategies, and eventually I think we are seeing that they are working more and more cohesively together in order to suppress the different people living in the Middle East. I think from our perspective that we need to work together more. I think the different ethnic and religious groups in the Middle East who has the same aspiration for democracy, for freedom. We should work jointly and better together in order to reach these goals. And I think together we can overcome those threats made by Turkey and made by Iran for the entire region. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kino. And Aram, please, the floor is yours.
Sure. I would echo Michael's comment about the importance of having the Congress and the administration on the same page. When the Congress, the Democrats and the Republicans, and the White House send a message to Turkey, Turkey gets that message and they respond accordingly. They respect that type of strength, and they interpret appeasement obviously as weakness. So I think that is. We need to avoid, as Michael said, the siloing of the criticism of Turkey and kind of like bring it into a more cohesive form, looking ahead to the next session of Congress, looking ahead to the next administration, find ways that we can help steer U.S.-Turkey relations in a healthier direction. In the shorter term, I invite all of you to visit anca.org, take action, encourage your friends, colleagues, constituents, take action as well. We are in a very, very dire situation as an Armenian Christian minority, and face actually growing challenges with every passing day. And we need the support of our brothers and sisters. Thank you.
Thank you, Aram, and thank you to all of our panelists today. You're all great friends to IDC, and it's been a pleasure and an honor to have you today on this call, and also to have you standing with IDC on these very important issues consistently. Also, a big thank you goes to our viewers and supporters out there watching at home, without whom our work would not be possible. We urge you all to take action. You can start by visiting our website, www.indefenseofchristians.org. On the website, there's a series of action alerts where you can actually voice your opinion, let your member of Congress know where you stand on these issues. As we approach the final days of this administration and the 116th Congress, it's more important than ever to let your voice be heard loud and clear now and also as the government transitions. So once again, thank you for joining us today, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.